Well, thank you everyone for being with us. And if we got into that feeling of that opening treatment, we have the essence of Thanksgiving. We have the essence of what we're talking about today. Thanksgiving is the practice of happiness. When we practice Thanksgiving, when we make gratitude our spiritual discipline, we are in fact practicing happiness. So each year at this time, each year we come around to the Thanksgiving season, and there's a cycle to life. We know that. You know, there's winter, and there's spring, and there's summer, and there's fall, and there's a time to reap. There's a time to sow. There's a night that follows the day. There are cycles to life. And we cannot escape being in those cycles. Those cycles are the very, very essence of what we are. Even the gravity that affects the tides of the oceans to some degree pulls upon the fluids in our body. We are not separate from, not different than, not apart from this magnificent creation that we see around us. But we are an integral part of it. That's why we fit so well. That's why we can breathe the air. And the wisdom that created these bodies knows exactly what to do, how to separate out the gases that it needs and put them into our bloodstream, and how to take the gases out of our bloodstream that we no longer need and offer them back to nature as a gift. And if we truly think about this synergy, if we truly think about this balance, we can see that we and the trees are one, and that the air that we each breathe and we exchange and we give as our gifts to each other, we are one with that as well. And we can start to sense this mystical unity of life that we talk about, the experience of oneness, which is the feeling of love, which is the awareness of the very presence of God. That's what I mean by gratitude. That's what I mean by Thanksgiving. So each year we come through the cycle, and it's hard to tell where it actually begins and where it actually ends, because it's a cycle, it's a continuum. It's kind of like the merry-go-round. You can jump on it at any point, but eventually you come right back around to where you started. And then you'll go through all points again and come back around and come back around. And here we are at this time of life, this time of season in our lives here in this hemisphere in which we live, which has traditionally been associated with the harvest, the fall, taking the crops and the animals into the field, getting ready for the winter, getting ready for the next spring. And this time of life, even from a secular point of view, is a time of recognizing the bounty and the magnificence of nature, of God's activity through nature. Here people are taking time, and they're going out into the fields, and they are taking in the bounty of what nature has given back to them from what they have sown in the spring. Typically this is referred to as a tenfold law. This is where tithing or 10% came from. If you give 10% of your seed to the soil, something happens. The miracle of nature, if you wish to call it that. The chemical processes, if you're more scientific. But something happens. There is an intelligence, if you will. There is something that knows exactly what to do in order to take that seed and to multiply it tenfold. So if you plant a bushel of corn, you get 10 bushels back. If you plant a bushel of wheat, you get 10 bushels back. And people have an opportunity as they are collecting this bounty from the harvest. They have an opportunity to feel connected to life, to feel connected to that process of multiplication, to recognize that they did not create this process. Right? Who amongst us can do that? I can give you every chemical in a laboratory and ask you to go and figure out how to put just the right chemicals into the soil to grow tomatoes, and yet you wouldn't do it because there's something in that seed that science hasn't found yet. There's something that it hasn't quite found yet that very simply, very naturally knows what to do. And when we participate in the cycle of life like that, this is why they say that working in your garden is being close to God. When we participate in that cycle of life like that, we feel that. See? We are one with it. We can't ignore it. So not only are people reminded of the bounty, of the magnificence, of the return of what they have sown, they are aware of their connectedness with all of life. They are aware that they did not create the processes by which this occurs, but they cooperate with those processes. That they too are an integral part of what is going on. For had they not sown in the spring, they would have very little to reap in the fall. They would only be able to reap what had sprung up, volunteered, what had come up naturally. So they are aware that they must participate as well. So not only is the bounty of the harvest a gift from God to them, to their community, to their country, but their very participation in the process is also a gift. And you see how the mystical connection starts to grow. So at this time of the year, people would take in, if you will, not only the fruit of their own labors. And this is important because the ego can get caught up and say, look at what I've done. Look at what I've been able to do. Look at all of the crops that I have been able to grow. Look at the herds that I have been able to raise. But in truth, the ego only participated. There's a much deeper process involved. And what we want to do through the practice of thanksgiving, through the practice of gratitude, is get beyond the ego consciousness to sense the oneness with the magnificence of God that is unfolding through the very natural processes of life. So people from earliest times would take in their crops and they would take in their animals. As I said, it's a time to get ready for the cold and the dormant winter. It's a time to take the best 10% that they had, the first 10%, and offer it to the temple, to give it to the temple. Not only as a means of supporting the temple, which was kind of the conduit through which they received inspiration and their spiritual food, but also in recognition that all of this bounty that they were harvesting came from God. The activity of God, the processes of God, the wisdom of God. They would take in the animals, and they would take the best 10% and offer those as well as a tithe to the temples. And then they would take, of what was left, they would take the best 10% of that and they would put it aside for next year's seed. Whether it be the animals that they were retaining for breeding stock or whether it be crops that they would be planting next year. So already, as they're engaged in this process of harvesting and of celebrating the bounty and of recognizing the goodness of God, already they are aware of the continuation of the process. They are aware of how they must cooperate and participate so that next year the miracle will occur again and again. The people of the ancient times and people today who work the soil with their hands. They have this connectedness. They feel this connectedness. And that's why in some of the ancient religions, the animals were considered sacred. In Egypt, there was a religious cult, and I don't mean cult in a negative connotation. I just mean a cult in kind of a different kind of religion. But they worshipped the cow, and they built their temple. The temple was built in the form of a cow. And when people went into the temple to worship, they went into the cow, into the womb of the cow, into this place within the cow where this miracle of life would occur. Cow is an amazing animal. It can eat the grass of the field and turn that grass into milk. And how does it do that? Not by its own doing, not because the cow is so bright in intelligence and has many degrees, but it does it simply by cooperating with the flow of life and the wisdom within it. The calf can grow inside the cow's body. And here the grass of the earth is transformed into the body of a little calf. And when the time is right, that calf is born. It leaves the sacred body of the cow. And the milk that it needs to live is already there waiting for it. So the ancient people, we can look back in modern times and we can say, well, how silly is this? These people worshipped cows. These people had golden calves. These people built their temples in the forms of animals. That must have been some kind of a real superstitious religion. But I say it was not. I say it was a very, very deep awareness of the miracle of life, the connectedness of life, a celebration of gratitude, of just being able to participate in this absolute miracle that can be witnessed if we would only stop and take the time to do so. And this is what people were doing around the harvest. This is what people were doing around the time that has been set aside in many cultures as a time of gratitude, as a time of thanksgiving. And we've lost that. We've lost that in our modern society. We've lost our connectedness to the cycles of life. We've lost our connectedness to the soil and to the animals. It's no wonder if you watch what's going on in the world today that Black Friday is trying to get moved earlier and earlier and earlier in the year. It seems like this year we went from Halloween to Christmas. The radio stations immediately began playing Christmas carols as soon as Halloween was over. The commercials on TV immediately shifted over to the Christmas shopping season. The stores started running not Black Friday ads, but yet they were having Black Friday specials early. And you can't blame the retailers. The retailers are trying to make a profit. They are trying to stay in business, and they are trying to move from the red to the black earlier in the year. Any one of us who had a business would certainly want it to be profitable so it could continue. But it is telling about the psychology of our times. We are moving straight from Halloween to Christmas. We are moving straight from getting candy from strangers to getting gifts from people. And we're not stopping in between. We're not taking the pause in between to give thanks, to celebrate our connectedness with all of life. So there's something missing. Spiritually, there's something missing from the picture. And we've seen it change over the years, over the last 50, 60 years or so. Thanksgiving in itself, the way that it's been celebrated, has changed in this country. Certainly there's a time for family reunions and for sharing good meals. But it's also a time of football and overeating and not exactly tuning in, attuning to the connectedness, to our participation in life. So when we talk about Thanksgiving and we talk about gratitude, what we're talking about is attuning ourselves. Rocco Errico wrote a book. He writes lots of books about the Aramaic culture and the culture of the Middle East at the time that Jesus was there. And he wrote a book examining the Lord's Prayer as it is given in Aramaic. And the title of the book is called Setting a Trap for God. Setting a Trap for God, which I thought was kind of interesting. And he tells us that the Aramaic word for prayer is very similar to the word used for trap or snare. You know, like you might go out and create a snare for a rabbit or something that you wanted to catch. And the act of praying is similar to setting up and getting ready to receive. And in this regard, he called the Lord's Prayer a series of attunements, that we are tuning our consciousness to get ready to receive. So it's like the example of the old song, turn your radio on, listen to the music in the air, you know. There's all this around us, there's all this available to us, there's all of this going on, but we can only take in that which we are attuned to, that which we have physically and mentally prepared ourselves to receive. And when we pray, what we are doing is we are attuning our consciousness to what already is, to what God already is. This is why the prayer starts with Our Father which art in heaven. This is why treatment, the first step in the process of treatment, is to stop and consider what we know about God. We stop and know that what already is, that whatever it is that we wish to experience, it is already some part of God. So we are attuning our consciousness. We are bringing ourselves away from that which we do not wish to experience, and we are bringing our consciousness to the love and to the peace and to the joy that we do wish to experience. We are attuning ourselves. And gratitude as a spiritual practice, and by that I mean recognizing the presence and the activity of the divine in everything. Recognizing that there are no ordinary moments, recognizing that every day is a miracle, that every meal is a miracle, that every breath is a miracle, is a reminder of our connectedness to life. This is why meditation helps us. We breathe all the time and when we barely notice it, but when we meditate, we sit down to become aware of what is transpiring. So gratitude is not a social activity, not kind of a polite thank you. You know, when we were children and somebody gave us something, our parents would say, "Now, what do you say? What do you say?" And we would just, in our best little boy or girl voice, we would say, "Thank you." And we were told to always show our appreciation because, after all, if we didn't show our appreciation, why would people give us anything else? They gave you a gift and you didn't say thank you. They'll probably never give you another gift. So in that light, then, our politeness and our gratitude became self-serving. We were doing something in response to something somebody else did for us, in hopes that they would do it again. And that mindset kind of carried over into religion, or perhaps it carried over from religion into social activities. But there are people who would say, "Well, now you need to tell God. You need to tell God thank you." And I've even heard ministers say, "Well, if you don't thank God for what you have, why would God give you any more?" And this is a form of superstition. This is a form of greatly, to me, limited thinking and misunderstanding. As Eric Butterworth tells us in his work, Spiritual Economics, what difference does it make to God whether you say thank you or not? Do we think that there is this intelligence that has created the entire universe out of itself, that has already given all of the gifts, that is the Alpha and the Omega, that is expressing its very life as us and through us? And it is so fragile that if Jimmy doesn't say, well, thank you, that its feelings are going to be hurt, that it's going to withhold in the future. If I fail to say thank you, God, for my breath, is God going to stop the trees from giving me the air? We need to examine that. Meister Eckhart, around 1300, mystical monk in Germany in the Rhine Valley, which there was something going on in the Rhine Valley in the 1300s. I don't know what it was, but there was a mystical upwelling there. And Meister Eckhart told his congregation, he said, I never thank God for loving me, because God cannot help but doing so. And when I first heard that, it was quite a shock to me. I never thank God for loving me because God cannot help but doing so. And the more I thought about it and the more I grew personally over the years, the more I came to understand a different interpretation for me. I can't tell you exactly what he meant because I can't get inside his head. But what it means to me, if we truly understand what God is and what we are in relationship to God, we understand that it cannot help but loving us because we are it. It would be like you and I saying, well, I love my left hand, but I'm not so fond of the right. I love my left foot, but the right foot I could do without. They are such an integral part of our experience here that we actually believe, in much of our language, we say, I am. I am having a pain, or I am this, or I am that. Instead of saying the body is having a pain. But it is so much a part of who and what we are in our experience that it would be impossible for us to think in terms of I love one part but not another. And if we can realize that the very love of life, the very love of God has taken a form. Think of the mystical implications of the unformed energy of the universe taking form, becoming matter, occupying time and space, forming stars, forming planets, forming galaxies, forming the continents and the oceans. And that very dust of the earth becomes the food that we plant, the vegetables. The very dust of the earth becomes the animals that eat the vegetables. The very dust of the earth becomes the human body that eats the vegetables or drinks the milk of the animals or eats the flesh. We take a step back, we realize that which we call our bodies is nothing more than some part of the undifferentiated energy that has taken the form of matter, that has taken the form of this body. And where did that undifferentiated energy come from? But it must be some very part of God itself. These bodies, then, are some very part of the body of God. how could God help but loving it? And what about the consciousness that we associate with the body, the consciousness that expresses itself through the bodies while we are here? Where did that consciousness come from? Did the dust of the earth create the consciousness on its own initiative by forming brains? Or did the consciousness of the divine that preceded all of this create the brain as an instrument of its expression? And we believe the consciousness that we call ourself is in reality an individualized expression of that consciousness, which we call God. God could not help but loving itself. God could not help but loving itself as me. This is what I believe Meister Eckhart was talking about. So all of the problems then that we face in life, if we think about it as Dr. Holmes told us, all of the problems that we face in life stem from an idea of separation, from apartness. God is out there, we are over here. I'm okay, but everybody else is not so much okay. The pie is only so big and we need to struggle to make sure we get the biggest piece we can get, even if we can't eat it all. And all of these ideas of lack and of limitation, of anger and greed and hostility, and all of those ideas are rooted in the evil, if you would call it, the evil of the idea of separation. The Hindus tell us there's no sin but ignorance. We are ignorant of our relationship with God. So gratitude is a process of attuning our consciousness to recognize the miracle of life, not only in our own self, but in each and every person, in each and every situation. Gratitude is a spiritual practice that is, I believe, the most effective and most efficient practice for turning a life around. Because if our problems stem from this idea of apartness, and we know that life is done unto us according to our belief, that life is a spiritual condition. The universe is a spiritual universe. And our beliefs, our mental activity, is the activity of spirit. The movement in consciousness upon itself is thought, and every thought is a prayer. Every thought is a declaration of our belief. And as I said last week, that which we keep our eyes fixed upon, that we bring back into our life. So if we are attuned to lack and limitation, if we are attuned to the troubles of the world, if we are attuned to the wars and the hostilities and the greed and the corruption, that is what we will continue to experience, because those are the seeds that we are harvesting and planting for our next crop. So the quickest way then to change our experience and to change our lives and to allow ourselves to step into a deeper experience of God, the deeper experience of the presence and the activity of God, is through the practice of gratitude. Through the practice of blessing everything. And by blessing, I don't mean waving your hands or sprinkling water on something and thinking that somehow we are invoking a power out there up in heaven to come down and do something nice for someone or some situation because we said bless you. By blessing, I mean us taking the time to truly recognize the presence of God in that person at that moment, in all moments, in that situation, in those circumstances. That is blessing. That is praying for our enemies. That is gratitude. So what we must recognize then is that gratitude as a spiritual practice is something that we can do all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If we learn the techniques of being awake and being conscious while we sleep, we can even do it in our dreams. This is how in the East they tell us that you can use your dreaming time for spiritual practice. You can become lucid and aware of the fact that your body is sleeping and your brain is dreaming. But you can choose to bless each and every person you meet in the dream, because they are all creations of your own consciousness. In our waking life, we can bless everyone we meet. We can be grateful for the very presence of God as that person on this planet at this time. Even if we don't approve of their behavior, we can stop judging them, and we can recognize that the very love of God is revealing itself to them as it has revealed itself to us, and that each and every person awakens sooner or later to his or her spiritual magnificence. And it's not up to us to decide for them when they ought to do it or how they ought to do that. We don't have to run out and convert them, because God has never been lost. God could never send part of itself to suffer in hell for eternity. Everybody's okay. God as everybody is okay. So as we take the time to reconnect, as we take the time of thanksgiving for our spiritual practice, not for our shopping, not for sports, not for indulging and overeating, which there's nothing wrong with eating. But that should not be the primary focus of Thanksgiving. It should be to indulge ourselves in our spiritual practice of recognizing our connection to all of life. To recognizing that what we are harvesting right now, that it is what we are experiencing in our life right now, is a result of what we have been sowing. And this very day, what we want to do is take the best 10% of what we're experiencing and bless it. We want to recognize that it is the activity of God that has come into our lives as a result of the way that we have participated in the creative cycle of life. It's not something that has been thrust upon us by a random nature. We want to take another 10% of the best of what we have experienced, and we want to save that, to plant it, to bless it, to nurture it, and to let it grow so that we can experience more. And we want to take the remainder of the good and we want to share it. We want to preserve it, put it in storehouses, can it, smoke it, whatever people had to do to preserve so that we have to give, to share from the very bounty of God that has appeared in our lives. We can always give someone a smile. We can always give someone an encouraging word. We can always look at someone and refuse to see what is wrong, but choose to see what is right. We can bless each and every person out of the abundance of our own awareness of God's goodness and our connectedness with God. So I invite you again this year to allow gratitude to be your spiritual practice. Start today, right now, as soon as we end the service, begin. Count your blessings. Look for the goodness of God where it has shown up in your life. Look around you at the miracle of what is going on around you and be in awe. Be in awe. This little piece of rock that we're sitting on is hurling itself through space, spinning around on its axis, circling a big nuclear explosion at just the right distance to support our lives. And that sun is moving around the galaxy, and that galaxy is moving around the universe. And the universe itself may be one of many in the multiverse. The things that we look at that appear to be solid are not solid at all, but they are mostly empty space. There are protons, electrons, and neutrons spinning around so fast that to the touch they appear to be solid. But if you look at quantum mechanics, they are not even there, the protons, electrons, and neutrons, all the time. They jump back and forth between states of energy and states of matter. All of this is taking place without you or I having to know how it happens, to do anything to make it happen. That is a miracle. To me, that is like the cow was to the ancients. That is a miracle. That is awesome. That is something to be celebrated, to be contemplated, to be grateful for. So whatever it is that appeals to you, whatever speaks to your heart, whether it be food, whether it be painting, whether it be music, whether it be sunrise and sunset, whether it be science or poetry, whether it be family, the laughter of a child, the cooing of a baby, whether it be your pet and the way that they offer you unconditional love, whatever it is that allows you to feel connected to God, bless that and be grateful for it. And allow that to be your doorway to enter into a deeper experience of God. Start to look at every area of your life. Start to look at those areas of life that maybe we're not so good to look at. Let's look at our enemies. Let's look at our wars. Let's look at everything and find a way to find the presence and the activity and the love of God in that situation. And that simple act of gratitude, that simple spiritual practice of gratitude will attune our consciousness, will set in motion that immutable law of mind that gives us back in the harvest what we have sown in the spring. Gratitude then is a spiritual practice by which we are constantly blessing and recognizing the goodness of God in everything that occurs in our life, and we are taking that as a seed and putting it back into the soil of mind, into the soil of consciousness. And we are telling the universe, if you will, or we're telling ourselves, this is what I will have more of. And by ignoring the rest, we're saying that I will have less of. And this I will have more of, and this I bless, and this I am grateful for, and I leave all the rest behind. That is the way that we participate in the cycle of life. So as we take time this week to celebrate our Thanksgiving holiday in whatever way is customary for us, whatever way is appropriate for us, I invite you to take time to celebrate it primarily at a spiritual level. Allow yourself to sit into the mystical state of recognizing the presence and the activity of God everywhere about. And ultimately recognizing that you are the very gift of God, giving of itself as you and through you to all whom you meet. And we should be grateful for that. And so it is.